So here is the fun little clicker.
Okay.
So if you click next, if you just you can just test it.
And I can put it here.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. So it's really, really easy. It just goes.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Did I give you my card? Oh, should you give me your card?
Julie got these out to make sure I got
Can I know you?
looks like my dad's phone. Okay. Countdown.
You've got this though.
Go for it. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. If you could maybe take your seats, we can begin the final session of today. Thanks very much. Hi. It's great to see such great networking, and I realize that we're the last thing standing between you and more networking or alcohol, but bear with us. We've got a fantastic session for you this afternoon. Steve this morning said that the greatest strength of our ecosystem is innovation, and he's absolutely correct. And in this session, we're going to hear from some great speakers covering the ways new innovative technologies can be applied to different aspects of drug discovery, clinical development, use in practice, and of course, importantly, safety. And underpinning all this, of course, is the need for effective regulation. So to begin, I'd like to welcome to the stage our first speaker, Camilla Fleetcroft from BSI, who is going to talk about Pro-Innovation Regulation Technologies Review on Life Sciences. Thank you very much, Camilla.
Thanks, Martin. Oh, you're right. It is super obvious. Excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Camilla Fleetcroft. I also have a background from the MHRA, where I worked on the devices regulation for a few years. But by background, I'm also a medical doctor. So I am now at BSI as their Strategy and Innovation Director. But the reason I'm here today is because I was one of the co-champions for the review into the life sciences technologies, as it says there. Rewind back to autumn 2022, and the Chancellor asked Sir Patrick Vallance to do a review into how we can better regulate technologies in life sciences, but also creative technologies, digital technologies, and green industries. I am only going to cover life sciences, so don't worry. The key goal was about where we can find that high potential to attract investment, enable growth in the UK-based businesses, and build our life sciences economy in the UK. It was a real honour to be asked to do this with John Bell, and a really exciting 2023, if I'm honest. We heard more about life sciences than I think I've heard in the 9 years previously at MHRA, and I think, June, I'm right in saying it was the only time medtech's ever appeared in a budget speech. So it was a really exciting year. People remembered what medtech was and IVDs, so I think a lot to celebrate. What were we trying to do? Like I said, we were trying to attract innovation, investment in the UK, support UK businesses, build that strategy, and really seek the opportunities in that life sciences sector. Just a bit of reflection, particularly on this first point around regulatory flexibility. In my first meeting with Sir Patrick, he said, why can't we just do it like we did in the pandemic, Camilla? And I said, well, that would be lovely, Patrick. Yes, we used regulatory flexibility. We streamlined a lot of processes. But actually, there needs to be a dose of reality. And I think June would agree with me, is that behind that was an incredible army of exceptional staff. And I don't think they get the credit and appreciation that they really deserve for what they put in. That was long hours, long weeks, Christmas Day, weekends, to deliver what they did for the patients and the public. So yes, it's lovely. We learnt a lot, and those lessons are really critical, but that was not normal. So what we need to find is sustainable new ways of working that take those lessons forward, but don't force staff to work the hours that we had to for the pandemic. But it was a really bold review. He really wanted us to drive it, wanted us to learn, to experiment. What else can we do in regulation? How can we do things differently? How can the UK lead the way in life sciences? But also, what's that? I've only just got started. I can't be that boring. Seeking international regulatory harmony as well. So where we can seek to harmonise, like with the discussions, the IMDRF, MDSAP, great examples of where the UK can really have a voice, but also not being afraid to diverge, where we see value and benefit, not only for the UK, but actually on the global scale, to have that courage and the boldness to go forward and do so. So May eventually came round and we published this review a little bit later than Sir Patrick and Dame Maclean felt we should have. But I just want to put out a thank you to all of those who engaged with us, our colleagues in the Office of Life Sciences and the Treasury who helped us get the report over the line. It was very much a team effort and I think a really positive one at the end as well. So it was incredibly broad. I will caveat this with, I think, probably too broad for the time we had and what we were seeking to do. But these 6 sectors were the key ones that we looked at: medicines, advanced therapies, medical devices and IVDs, biotechnology, engineering, biology, and agri-technology. It really was life sciences as a whole, which was a steep learning curve, I think, both for me and Sir John Bell. But the UK has been regarded as a centre of life sciences for a long time. And we need to continue that, we need to build on it, and we need to continue to grow in that space. We have the life sciences vision that's already been mentioned. We have the science and technology framework that was published recently, driving these key emerging technology areas, and we need to keep on top of them. So we engaged extensively across regulators, across the life sciences network, industry colleagues, across government departments. We even had a little chat with the FDA at one point. It really was very intense and very extensive, but it was really rewarding. And I just want to take you through some of those key challenges initially, and then we'll get to the good news towards the end. Overarching challenges across life sciences, so this is human health and also beyond human health. The flags were the skills and capacity, which I know we've already heard across all of the partners in the system, fragmentation in the regulation, so miscommunications, inconsistencies between regulators and indeed the legislation that they try to regulate, and regulatory boundaries. And this is something MHRA are so aware of particularly, but so are NICE and DEFRA, is how do we keep up with the change in these sectors? How do we keep up and keep agile with the new challenges that they pose to us? So just a little bit more detail, the skills and capacity piece, it was really down to the challenges of getting the talent through the door. And that was common across a lot of the players in the field, industry, approved bodies, notified bodies, regulators. It is a universal problem. Like I said, fragmentation between regulators talking to each other, and those are key challenges that came through so strongly. I just want to reiterate that those were key drivers for the industry partners that we spoke to. Human health, on top of those overarching challenges, these were the 3 main things, and I'll dig into them in a little bit more detail. Routes to market. Just too many of them is what we heard. They're too difficult. We don't understand how to find them, how to navigate them, what we actually need to do to tick all the boxes. I could go on. Data. No one shares data. You've got a different data set to them. How do we know what we need to generate? A good example in human health is NICE and MHRA. The requirements for access to market that you go through a notified body or approved body for, quite different to the HTA requirements in a lot of cases. So generating those different data sets seemed very arduous and unnecessary in some cases. And a particular case that came up very strongly was around cell biotechnologies and the impact it's having on the development and manufacture of ATMPs. And that came down to, again, regulation challenges. 2 regulators to navigate on the way, slowing it down, causing confusion, and indeed difference of opinion. So beyond human health, I won't talk too much on beyond human health, but if you'd like to talk about it more afterwards, I'm very happy to. But again, we see very similar themes. Lack of clarity in the regulation. Where does my product sit across this broader sector? Lots of players again in the field. Research capacity, not enough labs, not enough funding. These real challenges. And some people said, as an SME, I don't even know where to begin, and no one seems to be able to tell me where to begin. And that really hit home. You know, we need to be supporting innovators. We need to be supporting particularly the SMEs to find their way through the often complex infrastructure. Lack of infrastructure was, again, raised, and this was particularly with regard to DEFRA. And this comes down to a lack of regulation that really suits the products we're seeing and the needs of the products that are coming through the system. So our recommendations, we didn't make quite as many as Lord O'Shaughnessy. We made 12, but they all had many parts just to make sure we were being really detailed. So the overarching ones, like I already touched on, there was the real challenge of skills and expertise across the system, capacity. So our key recommendation number 1 was that there should be a network of skills and expertise predominantly formed around the concept of the centres of excellence in regulatory science and innovation that we do see emerging. We see very much in the FDA system, but bringing that to the UK in force, really driving that development, not leaving the MHRA to have to do it all, you know, building that support network around them. It doesn't all have to be as it was. June said this morning, we have moved on from the traditional watchdog. This is about dynamic regulation with a network that can offer the support to both industry, regulator, and build that capacity that way. There was also talk around a secondment system. We made this recommendation as well, where you have a sort of travel between regulator and industry, obviously under very strict requirements and contracts, but allowing each party to learn the skills of the other. So building the regulatory knowledge in industry, fantastic. If you can be more self-sufficient, that's brilliant. Less questions for the regulators in the system. But also for the regulator on the flip side to understand the real-life challenges of their regulation. When you go to implement it, what are those problems? Why doesn't it work? Why does it stifle your product? You know, really giving that dynamic insight into how regulation works in real world, which I think is fair to say, as once a regulator, we just don't see. You know, we are slightly blinded to that when we are focused on the legislation, how we implement it to the law. And that is actually what, over the last couple of years, has been really great at the MHRA, is bringing in that discussion with industry, being more open with them, and actually trying to, well, allowing them to challenge us and say, what are those key problems? So building on that, like I said, CERSI's stronger partnerships with the growing number of centres, encourage more centres to come up to support the system. And this actually applies both in engineering, biology, and healthcare. CERSI's are traditionally life sciences and healthcare particularly, but they do have a really broad offering, in my opinion. Pay levers. I don't think we could have got away with this without pay being a problem. Civil service pay is tough, and it is hard in a competitive environment against private sector to get the staff and the talent in. And I think that's across the board of regulators and the civil service. So we recommended the government consider how you appropriately fund and pay staff to get that level of expertise where you need it in the regulators across the sector. Data sharing across regulators. It was when I worked at MHRA, and it still is, boggling how much we don't communicate across the system. It is data rich, but that data sits in metaphorical cupboards, not doing a lot. So we challenged the government and said, why don't your key partners talk more? Why isn't there a safe platform for consent-based data sharing, allowing industry to come to MHRA, who can then share that insight with NICE, for example, and speed that process up, make it more efficient. And so far, all of these have been agreed to by the government in their response, so that was a good start. And actually, a lot of those were already in train. A lot of those approaches already known, but just the resource and the support to get them going is what is missing in a lot of the cases. And the final recommendation around the overarching challenges was, and we touched on it a little bit earlier with the scientific advice, is enable people to come earlier. Engage at the earliest point that a manufacturer wants to, but encourage them to come probably even earlier than that, and help them understand that roadmap. ILAP does it really nicely as well, and hopefully IDAP will do the same. Help companies to understand how they get from A to B, streamline that for them, help them understand, give them the clarity, and hopefully avoid some of the roadblocks later on. So human health. So we'll start with domestic routes. The ask was very clear. They want predictable, transparent and proportionate routes to market in the UK. There were a few points around this, and we actually released an interim recommendation that was also supported by the Life Sciences Council earlier in the year around the use of international recognition and the reliance model in the medtech sector. As we see it in the medicines and we've seen it expanded, can that be considered for the medtech sector as well, and IVDs? So that was one aspect. The other aspect is focusing on innovative products. How do you help products get to market more efficiently, hopefully in a more timely manner, but in a safe and effective way as well, not putting patients at risk, but how do you create those routes? And the ILAP, and now the recently announced IDAP, hopefully will show how slightly more agile regulation in these key areas, particularly where there's unmet need, can really show that the UK can be a sort of bed, a test bed for innovation, and really support that early access. The next recommendation we made was around the proactive partnership across the system, but particularly between MHRA and the approved bodies. We are now out of the EU. We only have one regulator, and that is an opportunity in my book to make things easier. But equally, it's an opportunity to rewrite those partnerships. So with the approved bodies in the UK, think about how that relationship can be more proactive, more mutually beneficial. Use them with the expertise they have and their thought leadership skills, and really create that dynamic dialogue between the two, hopefully supporting people move forward. I'm speeding up, sorry. Early market access I've already covered, and hopefully the ILAP and IDAP will continue to support that. The other key thing was around improving the efficiency in decision-making beyond just market access. So your HTA, helping NICE make their decisions quicker, speeding that up, making our timelines more globally competitive. We actually sit quite low down when it comes to decision-making, particularly for HTA. We are usurped currently by FDA, well, America and the EU. So drive us back up, make us competitive. NICE are already working on it, we know that, and so hopefully that will be the goal. I've already talked about the consent-based data sharing, so I won't go on about that. But the last one, and a very specific recommendation, was around the review of regulatory oversight between HTA, the Human Tissue Authority, and MHRA, trying to streamline that process and making that stage of the ATMP development much more efficient. And again, these were all accepted in the government response. Just going to touch on a couple of these, and then the rest certainly, you feel free to reach out to me. Regulatory sandboxes. Now, these weren't explicitly recommended in the human health, but they definitely apply to that as well as part of the CERSI recommendation. But really thinking about how you support in a different, more agile manner, allowing companies to test their new products under enhanced supervision of the regulator without the risk of doing things wrong, getting fines, being punished, and actually supporting innovation instead of walloping it with red tape. And that's why that recommendation is there. Again, a network of regulators, the Engineering Biology Regulatory Network, which I believe OLS might be able to confirm, is already started to be formed, bringing those regulatory minds together, trying to provide that clarity and consistency in a classification and taxonomy of the products. Good news. Sorry. So much has happened already since May. We know it was already in train, a lot of it beforehand. We've got the IDAP pilot now announced, which is really exciting. We've got a commitment to reviewing the international recognition and reliance piece. And we've got the Life Sciences Council still going on, which is a really great dynamic between government and industry. NICE welcomed our review, and they are looking at how their decision-making occurs. And I just wanted to pull this out, and I was talking to Alistair earlier, and the software roadmap at MHRA is really a great story. If you haven't read it, read it. It is truly innovative regulation about how the UK can be a global leader and really achieve valuable divergence, is my personal opinion. So I really recommend you go and look at what they're doing there. And we've also talked about it, but the extension of the recognition of medicines, another great step to making that UK that more pragmatic, proportionate regulator. Thank you. Sorry.
Camilla, thank you so much. And thank you for your support for such an important review for the UK. And great to see tangible outcomes from it already. So Camilla has set the scene. Let's move on to Dr. Beatrice Panico, who's going to talk about the regulation of AI in preclinical and clinical development. So thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you for inviting me. So Camilla is an impossible act to follow, so I won't even try. And so what I thought I'll do today is just to talk about the nice face of AI. And so I thought that why not to say that AI can be a force for good. So I just decided that today I will share with you some examples that are the ones that caught my attention, and of course there are so many. And then I will finish with a couple of considerations, and I will leave to others who are far better than me to consider all the important constraints and potential concerns that are linked to the proper use of AI. So I start with something that takes me back to when I was a scientist and I was working in my lab doing electronic microscopy, and of course trying to crack the structure of a protein was almost impossible. So actually I was very glad when I saw that somebody had found a good solution for that, and the somebody is the DeepMind group. Of course, as you all know, starting with chess and Go, then they use what they learned for gaming and apply to guessing the tertiary structures of proteins, and now this is in the public domain, and it's used with great satisfaction by researchers all over the globe. And I'm sure that everyone who's tried this can see how helpful it is to have this tool for researchers. And then coming back to something that is closer to our experience, let's go back to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the beginning, we didn't have a clue about how the virus will work, how it will transmit, and certainly we were all looking for new or old drugs to use to protect all of us from a disease that was creating havoc. Well, Benevolent AI went back to use a new machine learning system that looked into literature to repurpose for the purpose of COVID-19 drugs that were already there. And baricitinib was one of those. And of course, we have all seen that that was tested in the recovery trials. Yes, it didn't show much efficacy, but nonetheless, the WHO ended up putting in their guidance to use it in combination with corticosteroids, and it's also recommended in order to cut the severity or the potential side effects that are linked to the chronic use of high dose of steroids. So I won't even try to explain how this algorithm works, but I think that is a huge success in a matter of months, looking and creating a deep machine learning structured review of available literature for repurposing a drug that then has been used for the benefit of many. And then, of course, let's go to something else. We live in the age of precision medicine. We all know that it is possible to divide a big population in subpopulation by looking for specific mutations. And we know that this can be done through in vitro diagnostic medical devices that are close to Camilla and everyone else in the field. But when I was still at the MHRA, we were discussing with companies who were coming to us and said, look, we are thinking of refining the way we do precision medicine. Why not create a more intelligent algorithm that will screen for all that is known in a specific area to predict the risk? Well, this group has recently done something even better in this field. They looked into those group of people who have a cancer of unknown origin, which is, of course, a huge concern in the clinical management of the patient, because you don't even know where the cancer originated, and so how do you position the patient in the treatment algorithm. So through machine learning, they were able to identify from the blood samples of the patient not only the cancer of origin, but also to predict in the outcomes in terms of survival. And the confirmation was against retrospective data, and the algorithm predictions were quite good. So I think, again, this is a good way to look at AI to increase the prediction and also the diagnostic power that we have at the moment. Then I thought I will talk a little bit about digital twins. We all know about how difficult it is to have controls in randomized controls trials. We all know about how many concerns there are both in the scientific community and of course among patients when they're asked to enroll in a trial and they're told that they can get placebo. So what if is the answer? What if we could use a different system? And I thought I'll just quote a couple of companies that are working on digital twins. Unlearn AI has created a generative AI structures where they do something that acts pre-randomization so that biases are not introduced in the trials. They digest all the medical records of the patients that are to be enrolled in the trials, and they create the exact match of the patient that is enrolled in the trial, so that the patient will go in the trial with its own twin, and the system will predict how specific outcomes that are pre-specified will evolve over time. And this will be the control for the patient. They went through the validation system of the EMA that we know is quite rigorous, and their proposal was accepted for trials for Alzheimer's disease. And the other day I was learning that now they're trying to use it for Huntington disease. I'm a neurologist. I really like to see something new in these areas. Then I thought I'll also mention this other company. Altis is working on imaging. So again, we all know how difficult it is to work on imaging and to go beyond the RECIST criteria, or how RECIST can be applied to different types of cancer. So they've done something very similar, looking at matching the patients with their images and trying to predict how the imaging will evolve over time based on pre-specified parameters. And this has been used by the companies that are mentioned in there for their own trials. So it's already used. And then I thought that, well, we have to mention what AI is good at. We all have heard the mantra that an AI tool is just as good as the data that is given to digest, but we also know that the AI works very well when there is a huge amount of data. And where can we have huge amount of data? We are saying that we are in the age of digital medicine, and we are all advocating the use of new innovative measures in clinical trials, and certainly digital technologies are there to support different aspects of clinical trials, and why not wearables? But wearables means continuous, sometimes output of data, and of course this is beyond the will of the living, and certainly no human being could be able to spot anything in data that is continuously produced. It is important to manage expectations of whether a good use of AI can help the different stakeholders in clinical trials, if wearables are used in clinical trials or in different aspects of healthcare, to look for patterns, trends, and associations. And then I am all for safety, so I thought I would just mention and then leave to Janine to touch upon safety. Certainly, AI is used already by industry in terms of pharmacovigilance. One aspect that is already covered is, for example, to facilitate identifications of individual case safety reports and to make sure that they go to the proper route, to the proper regulators with the proper timelines, and that compliance is maintained. In addition, everyone who's worked in safety knows that, well, it's quite a conundrum to do proper coding, and that certainly there is the issue of the fact that the same thing can be referring to a verbatim that is slightly different and can be coded under different SOCs and different preferred terms and so on and so forth. So why not to create a structured approach so that we can actually identify things that go well together so that we can do proper signal detection. And that is the next step where I think that a good use of AI could be very useful, and it's signal detection, because we know already that signal detection is quite difficult. It's like sometimes picking a needle in a haystack. And I think that is really good if we all work on it together to use the computational power of AI to go from that chaos of the rush hour to go to get a signal and identify so that we can be proactive. Because, by the way, as I said, I like safety, and safety, it's not a bad word. Safety words make sure that good drugs can go to the right people and can stay on the market. And then I thought I would mention something that I found very exciting. When I have the time, spare time that doesn't exist, but I try to keep updated and go to interesting workshops and events like today. So I attended an event where I heard, we are there. There is the age of full cycle AI. What does it mean? Is that we can start using computational machine as already to do manufacturing-assisted AI that assisted manufacturing, but you can use it before to identify targets, to look for potential mechanism of action, to digest literature, as we have seen, and to use biobanks so that we can generate potential end candidates, and then it is possible to test them before we go into animals, or even without going into animals, in silico, and use the simulation to then predict which are actually the non-clinical studies that we really need. And then the output of the non-clinical study go again in the system to try to identify the best trial designs that will address end questions that we want to address. Now, this seems a bit too far-fetched, but actually there are companies that are already working on this. One, it's called Turbine AI. They are working with Hungarian databases, so they're using lots of data, and they're working at the moment, for what I remember, particularly on PARP inhibitors and this area. And then, of course, going back to the company that started our talk, well, DeepMind has just created a new company. You might have heard of it. It's Isomorphic Lab. This is exactly what they're doing. They're using all their database, all the computational power of AlphaLog 2 to try to identify targets. They say that at the moment they are concentrating mainly on small molecules, and they are trying to identify partners or to create their own pipeline. So I thought that was quite interesting to see. And so I'll conclude with a couple of comments. I won't bother you too much. But as I said, I think that we can use AI as a force for good, but in order to do that, we have to identify what is specific to AI. I was very lucky when I was at the MHRA. I was sent to participate in a wonderful consortium initiative that is the one that resulted in those guidelines that I'm mentioning. That's where I met Alistair. And these are the Spirit and Consort AI. If you don't know them, the Spirit and Consort guideline identifies standards for writing protocols and reporting data in peer-reviewed journal. Well, we sat together, regulators, industry, funders, ethics committee representative, patients representative, and tried to identify what was specific for AI to alert everyone to what they have to put in their protocols and when they report their data. And then certainly we do not want to reinvent the wheel, so AI means science. We have to use scientific method. However, as we all know, there are specific aspects of AI, so I thought I will refer everyone to the fact that it's possible to adopt the FAIR principles that were written for digital data and apply them to AI in order to have a fair use of AI. And I will finish with the fact that I was once debating with a colleague of ours, and he mentioned that I should read something from Cynthia Rudin. If you have not read what she said, one of her best comment is, why do you want to have a black box when you can explain it? And so that was the, I could say, the spark of the Explainable AI initiative that tries to do exactly what it says, to try and explain how AI makes its own decisions, its own predictions. And there are lots of people working on this. I tend to follow at the moment a group that works in Germany, and I just mentioned the latest article. If you're interested, if you don't, if you can't fall asleep at night, it's a really good read. But I will never try to understand the mathematics. As I said, I'm just a neurologist, but I can say that what they're trying to do is, with this latest rendition, is to tell us how an individual concept is translated in an individual prediction, and also how latent coding is used by the AI tools to do their predictions. So it's very fascinating. There is logic, and I think that we're going to get it. And then, well, we are here for regulations, aren't we? And so I thought that I will conclude with that. No matter what, if you listen to everyone who works in AI, everyone recognizes that there is a need for good regulation, good guidance, good standards. So as you've heard, I've used different terminology because different levels of I would say, oversight is required in different aspects. And we all know that the UK is leading into this. In November, there will be a great initiative for AI. Camilla has already mentioned the roadmap for AI from the MHRA, and there is the EU AI Act. The FDA has got the life cycle approach. So there's a lot going on, but certainly international harmonization is important. I will also mention something I collaborated a little bit with. The WHO has got a working group for AI in health. Everyone is welcome to participate, and there are technical aspects, regulatory aspects, and ethical aspects, of course, so you can contribute. And then my last comment. AI is already here, as we have seen, not only in drug discovery and clinical development. We all have our iPhones, so AI is there with us every day. But I want to reiterate what has been said by everyone today. In order to manage AI, to use it in a proper manner, we can't be alone. We can't have assessor assessing the drug and not the device and not the AI tool that has identified the target, put the patient in the trial, or managing how an adverse reaction is identified or it's then transmitted to the investigator. So I think that the only way is to work at a multidisciplinary level. And so I will stop here, and I will say thank you for your attention.
Head spinning yet? We okay? Beatrice, thank you so much for that. And as you correctly illustrated at the end there, AI and novel technologies aren't something as a future state. They're here and now. So the next speaker, Professor Alistair Denniston from Birmingham and a member of the Regulatory Horizons Council, will talk about the use of artificial intelligence to improve patient care and reflections of AI regulation in healthcare. So thank you, Alistair.
Thanks very much, everybody. And yeah, it's a great privilege to be here with you all, and I really enjoyed the day. And yeah, so I'm just going to kind of continue from where Beatrice was, but this is quite grounded in the sense that it's, you know, this is kind of very near term. AI is here already in healthcare, and so you may not have directly experienced AI-enabled healthcare, but I can pretty well guarantee in the next couple of years, each of us in the room will experience it in one form or another. So I know it's quite late in the day, but this is really near and relevant. So all these are different aspects of AI-enabled healthcare that I'm seeing in my local hospital. Some of them are still in the in the form of clinical trials. Others are absolutely being used as routine care. So ranges from self-help chatbots. If we start at the home, you know, people using AI-enabled sort of self-decision support tools, to community services using decision support tools to help decide whether a patient needs to be sent into hospital or not. We use a skin diagnostic tool for detecting skin cancer and triaging that, going through to hospital specialists. There's some really interesting work around using AI-supported tools, a bit like if you use some of the meeting software, things like, I don't know if any of you have used Otter AI or some of the other embedded meeting software tools that kind of can distill hours meeting, and then they've using the same thing within electronic health record systems to try and pull out relevant elements from the history. And then it's really AI is really mainstream now in segmentation and quantification of scans. So even if you're not using it in a diagnostic way, just helping you, helping you sort of demarcate and track a cancer is really commonplace. And then there's lots of applications being explored in the screening context. So it's just to give you a flavor of, this is not a future technology. This is something that is mainstream to one extent, but it's really challenging. And just at a policy level, one of my roles is as the system lead for NHS England for all AI diagnostics. And in that role, I get to provide advice around some of the kind of national AI policy particularly in NHS England. And there are a couple of elements coming through that are really interesting. One is an AI deployment platform, which is effectively a single platform that could be used across multiple health providers, whereby it's a sort of plug in once, and then the AI technologies can just drop in a bit more like an app store. So that's a way of kind of building efficiency into the system. And then some of you may have seen government announced a 21 million AI diagnostic fund focused on chest X-ray diagnostics, and that's live at the moment, that call. So, is this a force for good or a force for worry or something more? Well, no, I'm excited about the potential for AI health technology, because if we get it right, I think, it can solve some of that kind of major capacity demand mismatch. And in fact, quite apart from the capacity issues, it can improve quality. We could have more consistent 24/7 services, and it could work well for everybody. But there is also a kind of other scenario, which is highly variable services, brittle, widely distrusted, and might only work in majority populations. And I think AI is one of those things that people see what they want to see. So we need to be really careful. There is huge enthusiasm for it. And in a sense, we then have to challenge our own biases. So some of you in the room will be really excited about this, and we'll just work from an assumption that is probably better than humans, because you know some pretty dodgy humans. Others will go, well, this sounds really weird and strange, and I've seen Terminator, and I know what the end of the story is. And seriously, so we do need to try, what I would say is try not to exceptionalize AI. There are distinctives, but try and step out of the frame whenever you see these kind of AI in health stories and think, okay, what if I just call this a test? Then what am I thinking about what I'm seeing? What's the evaluation and regulation look like if this didn't have AI in the title and this was just a test? Because I think we get distracted by the noise around it. And that's really where I work. So I'm privileged to work in the NHS as a doctor. I'm privileged to work in the university as a researcher. And I'm privileged to work with the people who are actually making stuff happen. So like the MHRA, like NICE, like innovators creating tools, like NHS leaders trying to actually make the system work and deploy technologies. And our contribution, Beatrice actually gave a really nice plug for some of the work that we did leading guidelines around clinical trials for AI. We led a brilliant leader within my team called Xiao Lu, led the world's first meta-analysis of AI diagnostics and showed the massive gap in the evidence between the kind of they were purported to do and what they actually did, and found that of the 30,000 studies we identified, fewer than 0.1% were actually robust enough in terms of low bias to rely on. And so we have a small but brilliant team covering everything from large language models to target product profiles for AI technologies to bias in data sets. And so I'm just going, for the last few minutes, I'm going to just touch on two key areas. One is around equity and one is around safety. So I think much of the day will have been focused on effectiveness, but I think these are two areas that we do need to think slightly carefully in the context of AI. So this is a program that some of you in the room have been involved with called Standing Together. Again, MHRA being a partner on this, and it's around developing standards for data diversity, inclusivity, and generalizability. And it comes out of this increasing recognition that patient harm can be caused by or worsened by AI biases. So a tool may work on average, but it may not work for everybody. And I don't think safety on average is good enough. I think we need to be aiming for safety for all. And bias in AI, this is quite a nice framework for thinking about where it can arise. It can arise from the early problem selection all the way through to post-deployment considerations. But we're particularly focused on the data collection and what does AI learn its patterns from, and is that inclusive and is that representative? So we did a number of studies looking at the data sets being used to train AI models. Two absolute sort of leading use cases for AI technologies are retinal diagnostics, things like diabetic retinopathy screening, and skin cancer diagnostics. And so those were the two studies we led on, a second one with a brilliant team at University of Oxford. And they both showed the same things and got quite a lot of coverage, which is essentially our AI systems are trained on a tiny fraction of humanity, whether by every kind of metric you look at, whether it's by country, whether within a country you're looking at strata of society, ethnicity, age, and so on. But also, we often don't have the data. So we just know, oh, this data set resides in one country or not. And you might have images, but you have no idea the age of the patient, the sex of the patient, ethnicity of the patient, and so on. So there's a big black hole there. And there's a separate group looked at studies of AI tools being used in the States. So these are on-the-market products. And they're overwhelmingly trained on data from just 3 states. That's the top right-hand one. Similar issues around COVID-19 data sets, which is a study we're working on at the moment. So Standing Together, I kind of introduced it already, but it's about improving transparency of representation and bias in the health data sets and mitigating the risk of health inequalities that might arise. And so this was, again, a consensus development process. It links to the good machine learning practice principles, which was an initiative between FDA, Health Canada, and MHRA. And again, I would just like to signpost the brilliant work that the software and AI team at the MHRA are doing and the way that they are working with their international colleagues. And that roadmap, I'm going to trumpet again, is absolutely fantastic. And the Standing Together program, like many academic exercises, has a nice flowchart. But the point is that we were able to reach 58 countries over the last year with more than 350 stakeholders from really every group you can imagine. Draft recommendations came out in the spring, consensus meeting in the summer, and full publication. The final report is imminent. So I'd really encourage you to keep an eye out for that. That's at datadiversity.org. And a lot of it is common sense, but there are things within that are really not being done at the moment, and we need to look out for. Last bit on safety. Obviously, this has been touched on many times in many contexts during the day. One of the things to think about that's slightly different with AI is some of the early phase before it's absolutely in a normal health pathway. So there's often an in silico evaluation. But in fact, you might think that it would follow, like drug development, that it would follow a logical path. So in silico evaluation, then you'd run it in the kind of silent phase, then an interventional sort of standard clinical trial, and then some sort of vigilance phase on the right. What we're seeing is a lot of the technologies that are coming to market basically just have an in silico evaluation. They are just tested in stored data. And you can have really impressive numbers from that. I can present to you sensitivity and specificity in the 90s with a 100,000 N number. And it sounds really impressive, but actually we don't really know how that technology is going to perform in a live clinical setting unless you do those studies. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that you find different things out in regards to safety from different trials. So those in silico evaluations will only tell you about the AI errors. They don't tell you about humans, the human factors or the pathway errors. And they also don't tell you about downstream patient harms. So I'd be advocating for that we need to think about all these sort of boxes along the way. This does not have to be a slow process. You can move from one to the other very quickly, but I think they all have value. We heard about Camilla's brilliant report. This was a slightly more niche report that didn't get quite the same attention, but I still think it's a good one. So if you're interested in AI, do look this one up. This is looking around the potential for what good regulation would look like for AI as a medical device. So if you just search Regulatory Horizons Council and AI, you'll pick this up. This was in December, I think, last year. And it just outlines what we thought good would look like based on, again, interviews with many stakeholders, including some people in this room. And I won't touch all of it because we're out of time, but essentially there are a few things that come from the opportunity to innovate early. So I think that AI does allow early deployment, partly because you need to deploy early in order to get that in situ local evidence around safety. So if I develop a tool in Cambridge with Cambridge-type population, and then I deploy it in Birmingham, where I'm based, you cannot expect it to perform in the same way. And so actually that's a driver to deploy early and start getting that kind of live data coming back. There's also opportunities for predetermined change control plans so that we can have an opportunity to update and be much more agile in how we regulate these technologies. And then there's needs for thinking about plan B. So what happens if it all goes wrong? What is your plan B? So as I come to land, something just to flag is we've done a lot of work around algorithmic auditing. So what does good look like when it comes to kind of business as usual, checking on safety and equity in terms of how these perform? And there's some, if you look up medical algorithmic audit, you will come across our work again. And that's more detail on that. So to finish, safety is not an optional extra, and in AI you do need to consider safety mechanisms at every stage of development, right through the life cycle, and it needs to be collaborative and multi-stakeholder. We can't say, all right, this is the manufacturer's job. Health institutions have to step up and be involved in this as well. And it does involve information sharing and upwards to the regulator as well. So our group works in responsible innovation and regulatory science and AI, working together to try and make sure that patients benefit from technologies that are safe, effective, and equitable. And trying to bring science to help support research policy and regulation. Very last thing is we've funded by the NHR just very recently set up an incubator focused on regulatory science in AI and digital healthcare. So if you're interested in participating in workshops, et cetera, that's a convening space and you'd be super welcome. And you can just reach out to me or our community manager there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alistair. Now, really important, and I think everyone will be looking out for the Standing Together publication, and really important to introduce equity in innovation as well. To finish this up, Janina Jolly from MHRA, Deputy Director of Risk Benefit, is standing in for Alison, who we wish well. So Janine is going to talk about ensuring the safety of medical products into the future. So, thanks.
Hello.
Janine.
So yes, and thank you. So in a change to your advertised programme, I am standing in for Alison Cave, who unfortunately can't be here today. So some of what I have to say, and there's some nice segues into Alison's slides, that have been made by the speakers before me. I will canter through some of them and put a little bit of my own spin on what we're here to discuss today. So the structure of the talk is as follows. So I'm going to say a little bit about the challenging landscape that we're in, our opportunities for impact, and the importance of ensuring safety. And there's been a nice introduction to that you've already heard. And then some of the conclusions will be very much looking forward to the future, and hopefully that will be a segue into the panel discussion. Just glossing over that because it duplicates, don't know why. So putting safety very much at the heart of everything that we do was the Cumberledge report around First Do No Harm. And that very much grounded MHRA in terms of putting the patient at the centre of everything we do, and very much looking at regulation as part of the health ecosystem, and working very much in partnership with healthcare settings. So my background's quite a lot within the NHS and public health. So that's the space where I kind of feel quite comfortable. In terms of our regulatory challenges, so my introduction is I'm the Deputy Director for Benefit Risk Evaluation within the MHRA. I work to Alison. All of the work that we do in the safety space, predominantly post-market, is weighing up that risk and that benefit. And as a regulator, we will always walk quite a tightrope in terms of bringing that innovation to market, bringing those products to patients that really need them, but we have to make sure that we do that safely. And whenever I'm thinking about innovation, I kind of take quite a big picture view with that in terms of how we do things can also be innovative. We can think differently about how we are approaching the work that we do. So in terms of the challenges we face, I've mentioned being patient-centric already. We really want to accelerate that access to innovative products for population groups that need them. We've learned a lot today about the importance of that and about using new technologies to perhaps meet some of the challenges that healthcare is facing in the UK. We regulate on a UK population basis rather than an individual basis, and that brings its own challenges, particularly for patients who have been harmed or perceive that they have been harmed either by a drug or a medical device. Taking that up to a population level can cause us a number of challenges. We've learned a lot about the lessons from the pandemic. Camilla and I worked together through that. Her points about those hours are well made. But there are good things that came from that in terms of mobilisation, being agile, working across boundaries, sharing information. All of those give us quite a very strong foundation for the future. The pandemic also highlighted the importance of global supply chains. The changing regulatory structure, being a sovereign regulator, brings an opportunity, but it does also bring a challenge. And we have to be able to embrace those innovations in medtech and in medicines. At the heart of this is very much around positive regulation, being risk proportionate, being responsive, being agile, and making a valuable contribution to that wider health science agenda. Goes through everything that we do. I'm not labouring this because you've heard a lot about it already, but we have got a number of initiatives within MHRA which is designed to bring those products to market earlier but also safely. And my team also get involved in this from a risk-benefit perspective to ensure that that safety is there, that safety is taken seriously, that it isn't an add-on, that we're very much round the table for those discussions and that partnership working. So our opportunities for impact. Now I'm quite big on this in the sense that because I'm quite big on evaluation. one of the things that I want us to be able to do is be able to demonstrate with evidence the difference that regulation makes to patient safety. One of the things that quite often in the innovation space we focus on things that are rare. But what we're doing with this slide is demonstrating that actually these are the big killers in the UK. And one of the things that we would want to see is innovation in these areas where we can make a lot of impact in terms of health improvement. All of these things also have a social determinant, health inequalities aspect to them, and that's really, really important. And that's something that's very important to me, and we try and bring that increasingly into the work that we do. You've already heard a little bit about clinical trials, so again, I'm not going to labour this, but except to emphasise points that have already been made about how important that representation is of the diverse population in clinical trials and also in clinical investigations. So we've got Margaret Whitehead has done her review. We've been very much part of that within MHRA, and that will be an important important findings in terms of being able to take some of this work forward in the future. We need to know that those drugs, that those medical devices are effective in all our population, and it's bringing that population-based public health perspective is really important. You've just heard a lot about software and medical software and AI enabled devices. One of the challenges which Alistair has just hinted at is getting that data in. Quite often the harms are indirect. We see it as well with IVDs. It's really hard in the post-market and the vigilance space at MHRA to sort of get that data. Our data is almost always incomplete or potentially inconclusive. I'm going to say a little bit more in a minute about the work that we're doing to try and improve those data sets. Adverse drug reactions are also costly. They cost the NHS a lot of money in terms of being able to then treat patients that have experienced an adverse drug reaction. We don't want that from a patient safety point of view, but also thinking about that wider health ecosystem and the role and responsibility of effective regulation to help prevent that. It's really important that we keep that front and centre in our minds. So how are we ensuring safety then? So I've mentioned already about how we are putting patients front and centre in the work that we do, and we're increasingly getting the patient voice in things that in our work. So we've got a corporate plan commitment around making sure that 50% of our benefit risk evaluation assessments includes the patient voice. Various ways we're interpreting that within MHRA, but my team have really mobilised to make that a very important part of what they do. And it's really important that we do that in terms of making sure that we can be accountable to the public, because that's who we serve, and ensure that they have that trust and confidence in the work that we do as the regulator. So in terms of practically, in terms of what we're doing, so MHRA is investing very much in a common vigilance platform. We are strengthening our yellow card system across medicines and medical devices so that we can get those earlier reports from patients and healthcare professionals. We're very signal-based. Is there a safety signal here? And we really need, and we've heard already about the challenges with data, looking at how we can improve the quality and quantity of the data that we're able to analyse. And we're looking at a range of means to do that. We've heard feedback from patients that it isn't always as user-friendly for them as they would like, and we are taking steps to try to improve that so that we can really get that data. Increasingly, we are, particularly in the medical devices space, being asked by healthcare professionals and other stakeholders to look at things where we don't have a safety signal, but where they are concerned about the safety and performance of that technology. And that is moving us into a slightly different space. We've recently put together an interim devices working group, and increasingly we will be looking at the expertise around that group to help us with some of those discussions where we haven't got an explicit safety signal. You've heard a bit today about the MHRA's transformation. So across benefit risk evaluation, we have got integrated benefit risk evaluation teams that work on both medicines and medical devices. And partly that is to address the fact that those technologies are coming together in new and innovative ways. And that is challenging how we regulate those technologies, but also how we capture safety data and are able to respond to safety signals in a quick, prompt and proportionate way. So I've mentioned this a little bit already, so I won't labour it. But the integrated vigilance platform is the way of the future in terms of a whole range of different products, effective medicines, vaccines, and so on. These are my team, there's 10 therapeutic areas that work across, that consist of benefit risk evaluation and who take that data and who do those assessments and make recommendations for risk mitigations to ensure that those products are as safe as possible. So in terms of Safety Connect, which is what we're calling this new integrated platform. The idea is that it is an end-to-end system, going from those initial safety signals right the way to the actions that we will take to protect patients. One of the things that we want to do is ensure that some of this is scalable as well onto grand scales, that there is big time reporting analytics that we're making the most of AI and technology also within the agency, so that we can make that signal detection quicker and more efficient, which I've now just said. So this is really about improving our signal detection, looking at patient-reported outcomes, looking at the patient story, and thinking about how that can be utilised as much as possible. We have got new medical devices regulations coming in, and you've already heard a lot about the AI roadmap. Thinking about the future, thinking about the future, thinking about what we learned about during the pandemic. There were lots of invitations sent out for people to participate in almost like real time in order to enable that safety and surveillance, and how important that was. And this is one of our kind of replicable messages, if you like, for taking into the future, to really ensure that products are safe and effective and able to get to patients as quickly as possible. And one of the things that Alison would very much want to say is and you heard about it this morning as well, is about the NHS app and what a game changer that was during the pandemic. And how we need to be able to build on such initiatives for the future. So this always makes me smile because it's a very Alison slide. So one of the things that she would say if she was here is that this took 50 years to get from the first point to now, and that is way too long. And we need to do all we can to kind of speed up that process. And the only way we can do that is by effective partnership working and some of that shared regulation that we've heard about today. The MHRA has recently launched the Yellow Card Biobank, which is part of that will help enable a lot of this, that as the personalised medicines agenda becomes more important, being able to look at that data, being able to predict who is potentially going to be have an adverse drug reaction is going to become even more important. So you heard this morning about recruitment in that space. So this is really important. We're moving towards the end of this presentation. Thinking about, and I mentioned it at the beginning, about being able to measure our impact, being able to really evaluate the work that we do, and make sure that regulation is really being as effective as it can for patient safety. But one of those things is that the data is often incomplete and inconclusive. So one of the things we really need to do is build those data sets, ensure that we've got that evidence and that we're able to capture that real world data. So in conclusion, so this is Alison's wish list. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll just give you a minute so you can read it. I would agree with all of these things. But one of the things I would also add is the importance of health inequalities in all of this and being able to address that at a whole population level. What does the future hold for us? Well, we want to be more proactive rather than reactive. We want to be able to predict where we are likely to see harm, where we would anticipate almost through the way that medication and medical devices are used, where we might see those adverse incidents occurring so that we can target things effectively. We want to have a bigger focus on personalisation and personalised medicines, and the biobank will be very important to that. And we want faster real-world data. So really investing in those data sets and ensuring that we can build that evidence base and use that for the future. And the most important thing as well is we can't do that alone. We have to be part of this wider ecosystem with industry, with academia, with patients and the public, and with the wider healthcare system. And that partnership working will be key to achieving all of this. Thank you for your time, and look forward to speaking.
Again, thanks so much, Janine. Thanks so much. June said this morning that the MHRA mission is to enable innovation, and it's great to see an example of how the agency is embracing innovation for the benefit of public safety. And if I could invite the panel, please, to join us up on the stage. The other sessions this morning had a guest speaker on the panel who didn't give a presentation, so I thought I'd take the liberty and also invite a guest speaker. So I asked a AI chatbot, given the theme. So I asked an AI chatbot, but then I printed it out because I can't read it from low tech. So the first question I'll put to the chatbot: how do we regulate AI that might be becoming superhuman? So the chatbot said, as AI continues to develop, it has the potential to surpass human intelligence. Warning. And we need to address how we can ensure that it operates in an ethical and safe manner. There's a need for international collaboration and regulatory frameworks that promote responsible AI development. Additionally, there needs to be ongoing monitoring and assessment of AI systems to detect any potential risks or bias. Developing AI that is transparent, explainable, and aligned with human values is also crucial. Overall, it's an ongoing conversation and challenge that requires input from a diverse range of stakeholders. So cop-out at the end, but it's like it saw your slides.
It's
so,
a chatty chat.
It was a chatty chat. I actually said be more concise if you're So putting the question to the panel, what's the key aspects to regulate AI in healthcare specifically? Alistair, I'm going to pick you.
Shall I go first? So, I mean, I think we touched on it already, but I think, first of all, it's not to try and suddenly go, oh my goodness, this is something new. We need to create something entirely new. I think we have systems, we have structures that are experienced in evaluating and regulating. And so the first thing is to start with from where we are and use the strengths of the systems and the experts we have. And then is to look, okay, so that's what's the same, what's different. And there are things that are different, often not completely different to some of the other innovative products we're seeing, but they are a bit more extreme. And so the issues that we look at, particularly, there are a few we'd call out. One is around risk of bias, particularly bias pertaining to inadequately diverse and inclusive data sets used at the training and testing stage. Issues around generalizability, so when you move from one setting to another, or indeed from one time point to another, so they sometimes call it algorithmic drift, but the idea that it may perform well day one, but a year later is no longer performing well. So the generalizability issue is significant. And then explainability is a key thing. But there is an ongoing debate around that. I don't think that we need to understand every aspect of an AI algorithm. But the more we understand about it, the more confident that we and often patients are in trusting it. And so I think the evidential requirements are going to be different depending on the level of explainability. So those are sort of three distinctives that we often call out that need to think about in AI. But sorry, I took up a lot of airtime, but others may want to.
No, thank you. Did anyone want to build on that?
I think for me, not necessarily in terms of the regulation, but the use of real-world data in AI and software is something that I think is quite exciting, but as a regulator, very hard to figure out how you do it. So that for me is one of the big tickets: is how do we get better at using real-world data, and how do we be more prospective in that sort of sense? And also, and Alistair touched on it, just the importance of human factors in using these products.
Janine or Beatrice, anything to add?
I think Beatrice sort of touched on it as well. It's here, and we need to make it work, and we need to be pragmatic and embrace the opportunities for that. I think for in the safety split space, you want to try and prevent any harm before the harm, you can't shut the stable door after the horse has bolted. We need to be able to anticipate where those harms might occur and do our best to mitigate that in advance.
Thanks. And also, you mentioned the phrase not just average safety, but safety for all. Do you want to kind of get under that a little bit more?
Just, it's always a danger with sound bites is that they kind of lack nuance, isn't it? But one of the things that we've tried to communicate when we're maybe talking to policymakers who don't have a regulatory background is the issue around safety. There is a sense, I think, with some of the initiatives around this that, oh my goodness, we've got a crisis in terms of healthcare. We've got this new shiny thing. We can deploy lots of this new shiny thing and solve some big problems. And it doesn't work out of the box like that. And so one of the things we try to communicate is that you need to know that it works, not just on a good day, but on a bad day. And you need to know that it is safe for all, not just safe on average. And I think those are two key things. And again, actually just touching on what do we need to do, and to Janine's point. So we're deploying a number of these AI technologies in our local trust. But for every one of those, we've got an ongoing auditing program that we, the health institution, have put in place. So we analyze every, on an ongoing basis. It's not a completely live dashboard, but it's a very regularly updated dashboard. So we know the outcomes for every single patient that has gone through. And so we do, sensitivity and specificity analysis on that. We break that down by age group, by ethnicity, and sex, and including intersectional groups, so that we're checking that the performance is not, there are no vulnerable groups based on that performance. And then we're using that, we're reflecting that back through the existing quality assurance safety system of the trust, so that the chief medical officer within our trust sees that data, and just like for any other aspect of care, can say, yeah, I'm happy with the quality here and the safety aspects there. And we're advocating for that to be kind of more of a national approach, because I think everybody's slightly making it up as they go along.
Beatrice, anything to close off this
just
point?
to continue from what Alistair was saying, it's actually having this life cycle approach. You need to make sure that you do your due diligence in pre-deployment, but then it's not that once it's deployed, it's on the market, I forget about it. Also because we're already learning, for example, that AI makes the biggest mistakes when it's deployed, and it goes and hallucinates with big numbers. And so I think that again, this is something that we know. You do safety pre-approval and post-approval. So it's having this approach to create what is closer to a risk management approach so that you do exactly what Alistair was describing. You keep on checking the system and that it actually delivers as it expected. Otherwise, you take mitigation action. So nothing new.
Thanks, Beatrice. Thanks all. Let's open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask the panel? We've got a couple of mics on the floor. This first one over here, I think. So if you just let us know who you are and where you're from, and
Blind date.
what you mean where you come from.
Hi, Thomas Meek from APM. We're a news agency. Just probably a question to Janine. So very interesting what the MHR is doing in terms of sort of monitoring drug safety and sort of innovative work in that. I'm just wondering what the relationship is there with what's happening in the EU and sort of the European Medicines Agency, obviously doing work in that area, things like Darwin, sort of looking at large real-world data sets and sort of just interesting pharmacovigilance work. So, yeah, just what's the relationship there? Is there one? And do you feel MHRA, is it missing out not being part of that EU sort of regulatory system, or is the EU missing out on not having that innovative MHRA approach? So yeah.
So no pressure with that question then. I think that June touched on this in her presentation this morning about how very much MHRA continues those relationships with Europe. It's different. We have to acknowledge that it's different, but also with other international regulators. So we have those opportunities and we are increasingly making those opportunities on a more global scale to be able to have that, to share that information, and that is incredibly important. That we're able to do that, and all of the speakers have almost mentioned the challenges around sharing data and being open and transparent about that for the benefit of safety, and that is obviously really important. That feels a little bit like a politician's answer, but.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have any hands up? If not, maybe I could turn to Camilla. So again, congratulations on the review. Of course, now that you've had 5 minutes to breathe, the question is, what's next? What happens now with the review? Obviously, again, implementation. So can you describe something there?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I touched on some of the good news that's already happened, and absolutely credit to the agencies that was already in train. They obviously sensed our review. But I think next is to keep the momentum going. The review was, I guess, refreshing in the fact it gave us the spotlight for a few months. But I think it's important that doesn't stop there. Keep having the dialogue is really important. Keep pushing the boundary, being bold. What can the UK do to build that sort of centre of excellence again, build on what we already have globally, which is an excellent reputation. I think it will take more meetings like this for us to discuss openly the challenges, but I really encourage that dialogue keeps going without government reviews. Keep driving those discussions, and I know Alistair in the work he does through particularly the Horizons Council does exactly that. Being thought leaders, producing articles and thought pieces that say these are the problems, these are the challenges, how do we combat them?
Any builds on that? The other aspect. Sorry, go ahead, Alistair.
Yeah. So, one of the things it'd be good to get steer from you, Camilla, is how much is. Sometimes we say, okay, well, if we just reorganize everything this way, then everything will work so much better. But sometimes you just need more stuff, more people, more other resources. So you're able to just unpack how much there's kind of the clever solutions, but also sometimes we just need more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the magic answer to the resource problems. I think it is a really difficult balance, Alistair, if I'm honest. And I don't think there's a magic number of people that you need. But what I do think we need is a system that is more flexible, more agile, and actually all pulling in the same direction. And I think that's where we find our strength, and that's where we'll find our opportunities, is by all of the partners supporting one another, doing what they can to be transparent and collaborative, and driving for that greater good of patient safety and good products on the market, whether it be medicines, novel foods, or medtech. The answer is in collaboration for me. Of course, we need more efficiencies in certain areas, and we already see great improvements in that space. But ultimately, I think it comes down to it's not a one-man fight anymore, and it is all of us in it together.
Anything on the floor? Would you like any burning questions? We've got a question from Tori.
Thank you. Alison Shaw from MHRA. Still at MHRA, I should say. It's about the safety monitoring aspects of particularly novel therapies, kind of thinking about, say, the immunotherapies or other therapies that might have aspects of AI as well, I guess, but where they're highly, highly personalised. Maybe it's a comment more than a question, but I'm just wondering what we need. Should we be doing something different in the vigilance space in terms of how we look at that information and how we interpret that information in terms of the continuous monitoring of benefit risk of products?
Alison works in my team. I don't really feel that's for me to answer.
So Alison's
the answer.
So, I mean, one of the things, there is a relevance there to kind of AI in the sense that machine learning-based technologies effectively have the opportunity to do kind of simple pattern prediction, and most of the explainable ones are effectively a set of rules, and that's why they're explainable, versus much more complex, more black box individual patient prediction, which is taking a whole load of factors, some of which that we as humans wouldn't particularly note. Even if it were explained to it, we go, well, we can't see that. And so I think we're going to hit the same, or we are hitting some of the same problem, which is like an N of one problem, where every input, or every patient is unique, which we know, but where thereby the prediction is uniquely tailored to them. And it's very hard to know then, if that prediction turns out badly, was that wrong, or was that just within the bounds of acceptable error of a very high-performing device? Because we don't have any counterfactual at all. So I think it's a really interesting problem, and it's one that we're wrestling with as well. I mean, it's the whole personalized medicine problem. Evaluating personalized medicine. When we get down to n=1, how do we verify that? Great. Yeah, great point.
Thanks, Arthur. And I mean, talking about patients, I think all of you maybe mentioned the patient voice in your presentation. So could you describe some of the conversations that you've had with patients along the way, or the various aspects of the presentations that you gave earlier?
So I can kick that off. So I think that what's interesting there in the safety space is that dichotomy, is that patients, when we're talking about something that's highly personal, the theme, if you like, is very much about openness and transparency, and that ability to build trust and enable patients to make informed decisions. I always feel, and I would say this because I'm slightly biased, that it's slightly easier in the you're bringing something to market space, because perhaps the appetite for risk is different amongst patients, but they want that product, they want that device, they want it soon, they want access to that clinical trial and so on, and that's totally understandable. If something has gone wrong, and I always make this joke that if Janine's in town, something's gone wrong, or something has the potential to go wrong, it's obviously more challenging because it is immediately much more emotive, and that can be hard for everybody to deal with. But we have opportunities there, I think, as a partnership, as a collective in the health sciences space, to think about what good looks like in that space and what good practice really is, and we should think a bit more outside the box about that in terms of our innovative approaches. That's quite a long answer, I'm sorry.
I think there's also something about improving how the patient voice is heard in research and development and ongoing monitoring of products. So a little shout out to Melanie Calvert at the University of Birmingham, who does an awful lot of work in patient-reported outcomes. When we were at MHRA, and I'm sure you still do, we did a lot of work with her on understanding the value of listening to those and using those as part of our analysis. I believe that should be part of what a manufacturer's plan is, post-market particularly, is truly dialing into those patient-reported outcomes, listening to the patient voice. MHRA can certainly do an awful lot in that space, but actually it needs to be at the core of the product that is at the market, is on the market, and even before it comes to the market. So yeah, that's part of where I would put it.
And also in the healthcare setting itself, you must have had conversations with patients about their feelings.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I was just reflecting actually as Camilla was talking, we're quite privileged because obviously we can easily reach patients and ask their opinion. And I was just reflecting as I sat here that whilst I think this can be quite hard for the smaller companies to know how to reach. So you might well have a clinical advisor who can reach relevant patients, but sometimes they're not still practicing. So then, how do you reach those communities of patients? There may be a patient support organisation or a patient charity that you can reach out to, but if there isn't one in your particular area, application, again, that can be tricky. So I think. But this is an area, I mean, you mentioned Mel, who does fantastic work. This is an area where you can leverage maybe academic contacts who have reached, and we are really championing trying to bring patients as co-researchers, as co-applicants on grants. This is not just after the fact, oh, what do you think of this? Whenever all the decisions have been made, these have clear strategic view and role.
I think that's becoming a regulatory expectation, and from design of things right the way through to.
We heard it earlier today. Getting patients more engaged, having that more transparency in research for them to trust it and engage with it.
Thank you. And we normally talk about safety, quality, efficacy, but it feels like we've got another E in equity. And how do you design in the equity, or how do you ensure that the bias in this new technology is reduced as much as possible? Beatrice, do you want to start?
Well, first of all, it's been mentioned. One of the things, when we look at AI, we need to, for example, I'll go with AI, we need to look at what is specific. And one of the things that we should remind everyone in the field of AI, there has to be rigorous separation between the training data and the validation data. And that is one of the things. And the other thing that was touched upon by everyone is how the data that you're using to train and then validate the setting is representative of the deployment population. And that is one of the aspects. And then in terms of equity, I wanted just to mention something that I actually learned by working at the WHO level, because, of course, one goes into these discussions, of course, with what we know, but I had to step back and listen and learn. And there's also the element, again, of going back and do something that Janine is very aware of, that is the benefit risk. There's not one equity for everyone and for every country. Because while talking for the UK, of course we have the UK, but if you talk at a WHO level, you need to see what is available in different countries. And if there is nothing, something better than nothing is already good. And so I learned a lot in terms of where you put the bar for equity.
Fantastic. Anyone want to build on that from their experience? Alistair?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think I might frame it slightly differently, not so much where the bar of equity is, but certainly where the bar you put against the comparator. But it is trying to then make sure that in that context, that people, wherever that is in the world, that people aren't left behind. And I think this is something. Again, this may be a place where innovative technologies have really brought this to light, and now we're looking back at other technologies. So, Dame Margaret Whitehead's report, is also looking at pulse oximeters, etc., and other innovative technologies, as well as a theme around AI. So I think that's quite good that the lens is now spreading to other areas. And to Janine's point, I think that whole, what you're doing around the safety reporting is really exciting, and you could argue that some of that is driven by the challenges of new technologies, but now you're using that to inform the whole group of products.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I'll just open it up if anyone's got a burning question. If not, it just leaves me to thank the panel so much for highlighting novel technologies, the regulation, the opportunities, but also importantly the challenges. So please join me in thanking the panel. And now finish.
So it's for me to give some very brief closing remarks. So I hope today you've learnt something, met someone, or shared something, and ideally I hope you've done all three. I'd just like to thank our speakers, especially those who've travelled, those who've stepped in at the last minute, which I know has been a couple, so thank you very much, and the MHRA. It's really fantastic. You can't do a conference about regulation without regulators, so that's been brilliant. Our organisers, Tim, Kathy, Martin, Christiane, Chloe, Jane, the rest of the BIA team, it's been fantastic, and you as participants, you've made the day. We can't do this without our sponsors. I've already mentioned our event sponsors, Arnold and Porter and Transcript, but also our annual supporters, AstraZeneca, Avanta, delivered by VWR, Cooley, Cytiva, J&J, LifeArc, LifeSci, and RBW Consulting. A couple of reflections, if I may, to close us. I think we've seen the value of communications and chatting. I suppose I'd summarise that as we shouldn't leave it so long to do this again. I think it's really important that we stay up to date on what's changing, what's real, and we are open about challenges, but also open about where things have moved. And I think it's been brilliant to see the candour of the discussion today. The question that I have from this is, how do we get the best out of our regulatory science community? We've got fantastic people. We've obviously got some challenges. How can we best help, and what flexibilities do we need to be able to put those things together? How do we get old heads to help developing experts? I'll leave that one for you and a drink over as we step outside. And if you like what you've seen from the BIA, please, there's much, much more. You may have seen the cards on the table outside with QR codes, which if you put on your phone, you will find either reports, networks, or events. So report-wise, we've got a new report out on mRNA revolution, where the state of the art is for mRNA in the UK, aimed at MPs, so you can tell me if I've pitched it right if you show it to your children when you get home. Networks, we've got a fantastic Women in Biotech network as our next thing. It's a meeting with the dinosaurs, or under the dinosaurs in Oxford in a couple of weeks. So there's a QR code if you want to join the Women in Biotech network there. And events-wise, we've got Tech Bio coming up, we've got Bioprocess Conference coming up, and we've got the Gala Dinner, all in very short succession. Here are the dates if you're interested, and they are available. The other thing is, if your company is not a member of the BIA, please consider joining. We do fantastic things, and we're an organisation that's based around membership. So it's the fantastic membership that we've got of over 550 companies that enables us to do what we do, to bring that expertise, to bring the community together, to influence, connect, and save. So do consider joining if your company isn't a member. And my final thought is about our excellent regulatory committee. Can I ask those members of our regulatory committee who are here to put their hands up? Who's here from Reg? 1, 2, 3. Excellent. I know that many of them have been here today. They're meeting next week, and I know that they will take feedback. You'll get a feedback email tomorrow. If you can fill it out tomorrow, we can then get it to the Reg committee before their meeting next week, so they can then work out how to take next steps and what we can do. You'll also get to see some photos if you put in the feedback form, so that may or may not be an incentive, I suppose. But with that, and if you're interested in joining the Reg committee, please talk to me, talk to Christiane, talk to Tim or any of the others who are here. It meets more regularly and is the driving force behind our activity and regulation. With that, can I just thank you all, encourage you to give your feedback when it comes on email, and join us for a drink outside. Thank you all.